Hello, tubers. This is Pat Jordan coming to you from the Grain Ghetto in Illinois. Have you ever been in a band? Ever tried to organize more than 3 people at a time? You're lucky to get them to agree on what topping to have on pizza. Don't eat pizza, it's bad doof. My point being that when the millennium came around, I was abraded by what I call the New World Order vomit words. These are hypnotic trigger words and memes that are used by industrial psychologists to manipulate the reptilian hindbrain emotional responses in order to steer opinions and motivate behavior of entire populations. This never happens outside of the relentless audiovisual entrainment and the more modern silent sound mind control techniques streaming in all forms of media. You can find the patent to silent sound technology in the PDF section of my website. Although it was annoying to the point of inducing insanity, it was no surprise when overnight people started all saying, challenge, opportunity, and moving forward. These words are equivalent to computer programming. People who used to abuse me for my structured word choice of phrases that were over 3 syllables were now vomiting Oprah nudity, that's 5 syllables, as if they even knew what the fuck it meant. Chance, that's a single syllable word. The teary-eyed submissives on American Idol and other chew them up and spit them out shows would always thank their abusers for the opportunity to have an experience while meeting the challenge in a hope to move forward. Somebody stabbing an ice pick in my eyes and ears. From the instantaneous change of global language after the millennium, I felt a profound sense that I had been cast into a mass of pod people. Every single human being was vomiting these words as if they had always been part of the lexicon, even though most of the morons couldn't even spell lexicon. Then we examined the overnight insertion of Wikipedia and Facebook into every facet of life. Both are clandestine service operation controlled inventions. People across the world of all walks of life volunteer their biometrics, their GPS location, and more psych profile than an artificial intelligence battle computer could possibly wish for if machines ever had wet dreams. Brief history on computers. The first computers were tasked with 2 things: calculating ballistic trajectories and compiling psychological data. You tell me if that isn't tactical and psychological warfare operations. Don't think that I'm pulling that out of my nether regions like a feathered boa. It comes directly from the timeline in the dioramas at the University of Illinois in Urbana that just happens to host the Supercomputing Center in a mockery of life imitating art imitating life due to the Arthur C. Clarke 2001 novel stating that the HAL 9000 computer was born at the University of Illinois at Urbana. Computers are engines of war. Fucking-id. So what have we got so far? Machines that can do your thinking for you. After all, you never knew you had the opportunity of the challenge to move forward until it was implanted in your brain. Let's try this my way. The chance to make a problem work in the direction that you want it to. That would be literal interpretation, wouldn't it? But what is the practical reality? The binary forced choice of either being stabbed in the back or shot in the chest as part of an invented dialectic problem that will always set you back and never advance you. You might feel like you're moving ahead, but that is because the reference had been moved into negative integers before you even got out of the starting gate. And my point is what? In this little heart to mechanical pumping thing talk, I want to focus on the virtual overnight insertion of lacto-fermented, aka cultured foods, into a stream of society that has all the consciousness of a coma patient. I like to call these mimetic mercenaries mason jar maniacs and crockheads. Let us take a wry, sardonic smile at the very notion that the vessel of choice had the word Mason in it. For whether you believe that we are in a Truman Show play, or a Matrix simulated reality, or a Jordan-esque version of Dante's Hell, things like that are statistically just not fucking possible. In a multiple outcome universe, a Yehudish wet dream that I will never entertain, a cur or a ball jar could have been the universal meme. But it wasn't, was it? There still could have been latitude for my lewd criticism of the users of those jars. Miserable curs and rotting balls. You see, that's the point of this little talk. Overnight, one of the most dangerous psychological warfare ops transformed into a biological warfare operation, appearing out of nowhere, and the mindless align themselves with it as iron filings to a magnet, while the decent, well-intentioned searchers for the truth got sucked in by a powerful hoax. The last ones are the ones that I'm speaking to. There's no hope for the addicts. What am I saying? How can I be so harsh? We're at war. I'm not going to say, oh, darlings, you are slightly off course due to the influence of some people who were well-meaning and had your best interests at heart. No, this was a fully crafted campaign to assault humanity that was delivered as a complete package, the same way that the drug culture of the 1960s was a feat complete. Did I say same way? Because that is the heart of this deception. Whey from dairy is the most bacteriophage polluted industrial waste product on the planet. Whey is the heart of this military assault to deceive people into brewing, not fermenting, dangerous substances in open vessels on their counters. At the very best, the concoctions will be toxic swills full of antibiotics from uncontrolled aerobic fungi, strange bacteria that have as much in common with lactic acid organisms as a sledgehammer has to a pumpkin. Vinegar if you're lucky, peroxide if you're not, and histamine to make the most unmovable zombie slave work unit look like it had been raised from the undead. Of course, if your child has autism and is histamine sensitive, you could, in your innocent well-intentions, by listening to a clinically insane, biochemically retarded guru, push your kid into anaphylactic reactions and no one would ever know. I was confronted by a message board poster who ridiculously said that there are no reports of anyone being harmed from tabletop ferments. To a degree, that might be true. Anyone made grievously sick that didn't suspect the association, since home ferments are supposed to be healthy, might not even think it was their own mistake that caused it and then post about it. And dead people don't post on message boards, man. Unless it's a New Age website and they are channeling a non-physical entity. Let us do a simple thought experiment. You walk into a store and go to the canned foods aisle. There you see a glass jar of pickled beets. So instead of grabbing the one with the pop-top lid sealed, you purposely choose the one with the lid popped, liquid oozing down the neck of the bottle, and the contents looking questionable, if not in need of a serious shave. And the smell. I've been told by moms who had heard of the tabletop fermenting nonsense on the web and wanted to do the right thing for their kids, brewed up some nasty, and then asked their kids to drink this horror by plugging their nose. If it smells bad, it is bad. Let me tell you about properly anaerobically fermented food. Properly anaerobically fermented food smells fantastic, alluring, tangy, and is effervescent. It tastes like lactic acid because that is what lactic acid bacteria put off, not fucking vinegar because fucking vinegar is made only under aerobic conditions. Anaerobic lactic acid bacteria are autofermenters, never requiring the bacteriophage polluted non-food waste product of whey to get started. Or the damn starter cultures with the dangerous Lactobacillus acidophilus that is not technically a lactic acid bacteria, plus Hulda Clark said was a DNA donor to tumor formation. A fermented food will nearly always smell like a pickled version of the produce and nothing else. No sour milk smell, which would indicate that the ferment had failed. But if this was a tactical psyop, then you would want to cover for that failure of a ferment by inserting dairy into the mix so that no one would know that it went wrong. They would all smell like sour milk. The minor exception to produce playing itself on camera is the best fermented asparagus that I have ever had that smelled and tasted like the best fermented olives possible. No nose holding, no exotic pathogens to permanently rewire the gut. So how did a woman who claims to be the reincarnation of a dead dentist and a man who claims to be an authority based on faulty research and methods happen to become overnight gurus of a practice that is a literal danger? The fellow that tells you to scrape the mold off a ferment and stir-fry maggots that might appear in the open jars is now endorsed by the USDA. Given that my opinion of the USDA is that they are the modern incarnation of the Sarai witch cult of 1995 BC, that does not inspire confidence, but it does explain a lot. Sarai was either the niece or the half-sister wife of Abram. She was able to single-handedly extract herself from the harem of the Egyptian pharaoh with the knowledge and use of ergot toxin. These family secrets of ergot and its LSD from the witchcraft are still influencing modern society. I mean, they got you to rot food on your countertops, didn't they? If you wouldn't pay money to buy a jar of obviously rotten pickled beets in the store, then what in the name of your favorite pet god are you doing trying to rot them on your counter at home? Because a guru told you to? You don't need to believe me, but I have it on impeccable authority that when confronted with the dangers of aerobic fermentation of food, the mistress of this movement said that she didn't know anything about anaerobic fermentation, so that would be for someone else to deal with. Excuse the fuck out of me, but if someone told me that I was giving fraudulent information to the world, I would pause to consider, and if I found it to be so, then I would get the word out to correct those mistakes as soon as possible. This dismissal alone speaks of someone who is either just evil, stupid, in fear of financial repercussions, or working for the military. Did I just repeat myself? You don't need to believe me if I say that anyone that tells you to rot your food on your counter, then scrape off the mold and stir-fry the maggots, wash them off first, is clinically fucking insane and or a governmente agent training people to get ready for poverty, economic collapse, and dumpster diving as a game show contest. Are you fucking kidding me? Apparently not, and apparently on social media like Facebook, these freaks have quite a following. And I can tell you why. Without giving the deep background found only in my books, there are basically two kinds of people. High histamine, active go-getters, and low histamine, slave work units. People might claim that the abominations that they bubble on their countertops actually make them feel good. Sure. The histamine hit might activate systems that their otherwise suppressed bodies never had access to, but the vinegars, alcohols, peroxides, toxic aldehydes, and a host of bugs that shouldn't be available outside of a level 3 biohazard containment will eventually catch up with them. Thing of it is, we don't live in isolation. If they're culturing pathogens in their silly little jars with toxic metal lids, they're also growing them in their guts like typhoid Marys, ready to spread them to their families, friends, and the world. The bugs will want to replicate, so those bugs will influence the host to tell their friends and family and cyber audiences how to do everything wrong and save money by rotting food in mason jars and open crocks. You see, there is an initial investment in anaerobic fermentation vessels, but for the sake of being a miser, most people adopt the other mind control meme of hacking an idea so they think they're saving a few bucks while they are poisoning themselves with cheap soda ash glass, metal contamination, and aerobic witch's brews. Dumbasses? If a jar can force liquid and gases out onto your counter from under the lid, then it isn't fucking airtight now, is it? Get a fucking science degree before you reincarnate. As to the crocks, the method of fermentation in older times was to salt the holy hell out of it to discourage the formation of mold, then seal the lid with an impermeable substance to restrict oxygen in vessels that are not as efficient as modern ones with commercial airlocks. The ancients buried their crocks in the ground, for God's sakes, yet modern gurus who think they are tapped into former wisdom tell their acolytes to put gauze and rocks and toxic modern plastic over their rotting swamps to keep the dead below the brine. When you know that yeast can survive in aerobic conditions up to 20% brines, you get a sense that DARPA doesn't even need to make designer bugs anymore. Biowarfare has gone cottage industry. By the way, 20% brine is nearly 6 times the salinity of salt water, so when assholes say that nothing can grow in salt, they are just advertising that they are fucking morons. These blatant crafted ignorances and lies are what tells me that food fermentation did not arise spontaneously as a movement to improve people's health. Kombucha alone is one of the greatest frauds on the planet. Kombucha fungus was indigenous to China and was brought to Russia. If you are not fermenting with this organism, then you are not making kombucha. Period. Get it? If not, then you're too stupid to live. If you are simply tossing in yeast and sugar, you're making goddamn beer with a snot plug. Are you really that mind-controlled, brain-dead, or fucking stupid? People are being eaten alive by yeast. Candida and Saccharomyces are nearly genetically interchangeable. No one in a health-conscious state would ever use white sugar, yet this is a requirement for this tabletop disaster. Vinegar, alcohol, antibiotics from unknown, untested aerobic microbes, and a thing called SCOBY are the prize. Kombucha? Betcha. Isn't anyone sensitive to the concurrent trends other than me? I resent being a parent to a world of autistic adults. At the same time as the introduction of kombucha was the rise in what are called ropeworm parasites. If you read the websites and message postings, you will find that you only need to gargle with kombucha to form what were lovingly called jellyfish that would tell even the slightest remnant of brain cells that you are creating a brand new artificial disease with an invented name by your own misguided action. I do health consults with people who have the most complex and damaging conditions, so I approach their cases with thoughtful understanding and compassion. I never harm people who have sought help. New sentence. There is a point where people are being just fucking stupid and they have to be told so in the off chance that the embarrassment might shock them out of being fucking stupid. The secret to traumatic mind control is, well, trauma. The only way to insert new programming is to traumatize someone again and then give them new instructions. If I have harmed you in any way, then you're welcome. Wake the hell up! The arguments I have presented are logical. Anyone, when presented with these facts, should see the reason in them and then be able to adjust their life accordingly. Those who knee-jerk react to this information out of hand will have a twofold problem. One, they are victims of the mind control that embeds decisions and actions based on emotional choice. Remember how I opened this video with the concept of industrial psychologists that use reptilian hot-button words to make you buy products? Logic actually drives a false emotional choice deeper. Sorry, I can't help you. I'm not a professional deprogrammer. 2, you have been polluted by bugs that are not natural to the human frame. These bugs will exert influence over you to foster the conditions in which they can continue to replicate. This will include forcing you to continue to brew shit in open jars and crocks, then bringing that petri dish methods to others, like the little girl putting alien embryos in the mailboxes along the road in the movie The Puppet Masters. These days, the meme of the human biome is everywhere. People talk about it like they know what it is from citing studies of the biome influencing mood and behavior. Anyone with a yeast infection knows that that single organism can force food choices even against the best interest of the host. Bugs can tell you what to do. When you consider that the greatest proportion of serotonin is not made by the host but by the organisms in the gut, then you can be assured that if you are feeding the bugs, they will reward you, and if you piss them off, they will punish you. After this, you should never view a quorum-sensing collective organism as some mindless bug. Microbes can steer the host like a puppeteer. If you have polluted yourself with bad bugs, then those bad bugs will tell you what to do. If you have sought out the proper methods of fermenting foods, then you will cultivate good bugs, and they will work in concert with your best interest and that of the biosphere. My goal was to present you with the view of a map of a minefield before you entered it, or as a guide to a way out if you were already there. Here be monsters. In 8 years, I have done my best to distance myself from commercial interests. This topic, however, is so critical that I will suggest that the world's foremost authority on science-based anaerobic fermentation will be found at picklit.com. That's pickl-it.com. I have no financial ties whatsoever to them or competing interests in any other entity. The only book on the subject that I will recommend is available through my website on the food fermentation page. You will find the biggest names on the internet blindly advocating rotting material on countertops and mason jars. It's damaging to the mind to consider that all of alternative medicine is nothing but the sane net designed to catch and control or kill the smart ones that avoided mainstream medicine. But there is a lesson from Kathy O'Brien of Transformation of America. When you see that all the leaders of the world and those in positions of authority and power are all on the side of darkness, you get a sense of despair that there's nowhere to go for help. This alone should turn you inside to find the answers of and for yourself. Science with a capital S, not the whore science with the lowercase s that sells itself to the highest bidder, is my guide and always has been my guide. Science has never let me down. Science and opposite day, but that's for another video. Cheers.